The hospital smelled of antiseptic and despair, a sharp sting that burned in my nostrils and clung to my clothes like damp regret. The fluorescent lights above buzzed and flickered with just enough cruelty to make my temples throb. I sat hunched in a cracked vinyl chair outside my father's room, twisting the hem of my faded sweater until the threads pulled loose. Each tug felt like I was unraveling myself, my courage, my hope, my strength, until there was nothing left but fear. The doctor's voice still rang in my head, clinical and merciless. Without surgery, weeks, maybe days. The words pressed on me like invisible hands, squeezing my lungs until every breath hurt. Through the window in the door I could see my father, the man who once lifted me onto his shoulders so I could touch the stars with my fingertips now lay pale against the hospital sheets, his chest rising with a struggle that terrified me. The weight of unpaid bills pressed against me harder than the walls of this place. I had no money, no insurance, no miracles hidden in my pockets, just empty hands and a breaking heart. I pressed my palms against my eyes to hold back the tears, but they came anyway, hot, silent, and bitter. Crying would not save him. Crying would not buy time. I needed something, anything, and the thought that nothing was coming was enough to hollow me out from the inside. That was when the air shifted, like the entire world inhaled and held its breath. The sound of polished shoes clicking against linoleum echoed down the corridor. I lifted my head and my breath faltered. He was there, Ares Kane. His name was a sharp blade that everyone seemed to know. Billionaire, philanthropist, enigma. His face was the one that filled glossy magazine covers, the one whispered about in boardrooms and gossip columns. A man made of shadows and sharp edges. He stood in the sterile corridor as though he owned it, his tailored black suit drinking in the harsh light, his presence pulling the oxygen out of the room. Nurses slowed as they passed, their whispers trailing behind him like moths orbiting a flame. But his gaze was fixed only on me. His eyes, storm gray, piercing, too cold and too alive all at once, locked with mine, and I forgot how to breathe. Miss Elena Hart. His voice was low, smooth as aged whiskey, carrying weight that made my spine stiffen. He shouldn't have known my name, yet he did. I scrambled to my feet, smoothing the front of my worn sweater as though it could disguise the smallness I felt beside him. My throat tightened, too thick to force words out, so I only nodded. "I understand your father needs surgery," he said. He didn't soften, didn't smile. His gaze cut straight through me, to the pieces of me I tried to keep hidden. "I can pay for it. All of it." For a moment, hope flared in my chest, bright and dangerous, but suspicion clawed it back down. Men like him did not offer miracles without carving a price out of you. My voice scraped raw as I forced the question past my lips. "Why? Why would you help us?" His storm gray eyes flickered, something raw surfacing for the briefest second before it vanished. "Because I can." The words were delivered simply, like they were the most obvious truth in the world. He stepped closer, and the air thickened with the scent of cedarwood and something darker, like rain on stone. From his jacket he pulled a single sheet of paper, a contract stark in its simplicity. He handed it to me, his fingers steady. "Sign this, and walk into my suite tonight. One night, no questions, or walk away." The paper shook in my hands, the black ink blurring through the wetness in my eyes. My father's weak breaths whispered through the glass beside me, reminding me of the urgency, the dwindling time. My stomach twisted until it hurt. One night, my body, in exchange for my father's life. The math was brutal, the kind of bargain that carved you hollow no matter which way you chose. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the contract back in his face, to shout that I wasn't a thing to be bought. But then my gaze slid to the man in that bed, the one who told me bedtime stories about stars that never fell, the one who gave everything, who was now slipping away. Weeks, maybe days. My heart clenched. My hands trembled. His pen was cold against my skin as he offered it to me, and my fingers closed around it like they didn't belong to me. Each letter of my name scrawled across the line was a surrender, a wound I carved into myself. It felt like bleeding in ink. He took the paper back, his fingertips brushing mine just long enough to send a jolt racing through me, sharp and unwanted. "Nayukok," he said softly, almost human for a fraction of a second. The penthouse at the obsidian tower. And then he turned, his footsteps echoing away, leaving me with the crushing weight of the deal I had just made. My knees gave out and I sank back into the chair, my face buried in my hands. What had I done? The contract was gone, but its chains were already locked around me. For my father's life, I had traded my first night. And as the hospital clock ticked closer to 9, I knew I was walking into a storm that could break me forever. The elevator doors slid shut behind me with a low, metallic hum, sealing me inside a cage of glass and steel that climbed toward the sky. My stomach lurched as the floor numbers flickered upward too fast, as if the ground was being stolen out from under me. My fingers gripped the strap of my purse so tightly that my knuckles ached, and the red silk dress clung to me like a second skin, suffocating in its beauty. It had arrived at my apartment earlier in a black velvet box with a note written in sharp, deliberate strokes. "Wear this. No choices. No questions. Only command." The fabric shimmered against the harsh light of the elevator, cut la, ow across my chest, my shoulders bare. In the mirror of the polished steel doors, I barely recognized myself. My hair, usually pulled back in a careless braid, now fell in dark waves over one shoulder, framing a face that looked far too fragile to belong to the girl I once knew. The crimson lips staring back at me belonged to someone else, a stranger stepping into a world she did not belong to. I whispered to my reflection as the numbers climbed higher. "You can do this, Elena. For Dad." The words cracked in the stillness, thin and brittle like glass ready to shatter. The elevator chimed, a sound too bright, too final. The doors opened and I stepped into silence that pressed against my ears like a held breath. The penthouse was nothing like I had imagined. It wasn't just wealth. It was power turned into walls and glass, a cathedral of marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows that swallowed the skyline, the city lights glittering like stars that had fallen and forgotten how to shine. The air smelled faintly of leather and winter rain, sharp and clean, but heavy with something darker. Each click of my heels echoed in the cavernous space, each step a reminder that I was walking deeper into a storm I had agreed to but did not understand. My pulse beat louder than my footsteps. My skin prickled and my breath came shallow. Ares stood by the windows, his back to me, one hand in his pocket, the other cradling a glass of amber liquid that glowed in the dim light. The city stretched behind him, endless and untouchable, but he stood as though it belonged to him, as though he had built it from stone with his own hands. He didn't turn at once, but I felt his awareness, felt the weight of his attention on me before his gaze ever met mine. When he finally turned, storm-gray eyes found me, piercing through silk and skin, straight into the trembling heart I had tried to hide. For a moment he said nothing. He only looked, and the silence between us grew thick, dangerous, alive. "You came." His voice was low, surprised, almost reverent, like he hadn't expected me to obey. I swallowed hard, my arms folding across my chest to hide the way his gaze stripped me bare. "I didn't have a choice," I said, sharper than I meant, each word a shield against the way he looked at me. "You made sure of that." His lips curved, not a smile, but a shadow of one, dark and unreadable. "You always have a choice, Elena." My name on his tongue sent heat rushing through me, unwanted, terrifying. He took a step closer, the soft tap of his shoes against marble reverberating like a countdown. The air between us thickened, cedarwood and whiskey curling around me until I could hardly breathe. My heels scuffed against the rug as I stepped back, my heart thrashing against my ribs. "Don't," I whispered, my voice trembling in the vastness of the room. "Don't pretend this is anything but a transaction." Something flickered in his eyes, a flash of shadow. Then he set his glass down with a sharp clink on the table. When he crossed the distance between us, he did not touch me, not yet, but the heat of him wrapped around me like gravity itself. His gaze held me, storm gray and raw, searching, asking, "Is that what you think this is?" His words were soft, dangerous, like secrets whispered in the dark. "A transaction?" My throat tightened. "Isn't it?" He lifted a hand slowly, deliberate, until his fingers brushed a loose strand of hair back behind my ear. The touch was fleeting, almost tender, but it set fire to my skin. "Maybe," he said, voice rougher now, eyes locked on mine. "But you are not just a signature on a page, and I am not just a man with money." My heart raced, betraying me, thundering loud enough for him to hear. I wanted to push him away, to remind him of the contract, of the cruel truth that had led me here. But his closeness, the care in his touch, cracked something in me I had fought to keep sealed. I closed my eyes because looking at him was too dangerous. Too much. His breath brushed warm against my skin, his thumb lingering at the edge of my jaw, and the air between us trembled with the question he had not yet asked. The city glittered outside the glass walls like 1,000 watching eyes. Inside, silence wrapped around us, heavy, waiting, as if the night itself leaned closer to hear what would happen next. The night outside the penthouse windows burned with city lights, but inside the room the air was thick enough to drown me. Ares stood close, so close that I could feel the warmth of his breath on my skin, the storm in his eyes breaking every wall I had built. My heart raced against my ribs like it was trying to escape. I told myself this was only a contract, only survival, only one night. But the way he looked at me made every lie taste like fire. His hand hovered near my cheek, not touching, just waiting. The silence between us was alive, trembling, heavy with the weight of choices I wasn't ready to make. My lips parted, but no sound came out. My throat too dry, my body betraying me with a shiver that I couldn't hide. Then his voice cut through the silence, low and rough, like a secret being torn from him. "Tell me you want this. Tell me you are here." The words pierced me, and I hated them because they forced me to face the truth I was running from. I should have said no. I should have pushed him away. But when his eyes searched mine, raw and unguarded, my defenses cracked. I whispered, "I am here." The confession felt like a betrayal of myself, yet it was the most honest thing I had ever said. His lips brushed mine, not a demand but a question, soft and uncertain. The touch set fire to my veins, a wildfire I could not put out. I froze, torn between fear and something far more dangerous. Then my hands betrayed me, reaching, curling into his shirt, pulling him closer. His arms closed around me, steady and unyielding, holding me like I was the only thing keeping him upright. The city outside blurred, the lights dimming, the world shrinking until there was nothing left but his heartbeat pounding against my palm. When he kissed me again, it was deeper, slower, like he was memorizing me, tasting every secret I didn't want to share. My red silk dress slid from my shoulders, pooling at my feet like spilled wine, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. I was exposed, trembling, but he didn't devour me. He looked at me as if I were sacred, as if touching me cost him something. His fingers traced the curve of my collarbone, each movement careful, reverent, like I might shatter. "You are beautiful," he murmured, the words heavy, not flattery but confession. I wanted to laugh, to tell him I was nothing more than a desperate girl drowning in debts and broken dreams, but the words lodged in my throat. Because in that moment, under his gaze, I almost believed him. He led me to the bed, the sheets cool against my skin as he leaned over me. His shirt fell away, revealing scars etched across his chest, marks of battles I could not name. He was not untouchable here. He was not the billionaire myth on glossy covers. He was a man, scarred and breathing hard, as human and breakable as me. When our bodies finally came together, it wasn't about the contract. It wasn't about money. It wasn't even about survival. It was about the way his hands trembled as they held me, the way his voice broke when he whispered my name, the way he moved like he was terrified of losing something he had only just found. Each kiss was a vow unspoken, each touch a question asked and answered in silence. I gave him what I had promised, but he took more than my body. He took the pieces of me I had never given to anyone, the fragile parts I thought I had buried. And as dawn crept across the glass walls, painting the room in pale gold, I realized the truth that scared me more than anything. This wasn't just a transaction anymore, it was something I couldn't name, something that already had its claws in me. And when I closed my eyes, the last thing I felt was his arms wrapped around me, holding me as if I was the only thing keeping the storm inside him from breaking loose. But when I opened them again, the bed was cold. Ares was gone, and in his place lay a single folded note. "The hospital has been paid. You are free." Those words should have been a blessing, but they landed like a blade. I was free, and yet I had never felt so bound. The room was too quiet when I woke, the kind of silence that pressed on my ears until it hurt. Pale light spilled across the penthouse floor, but the warmth of his body was gone. My hand reached for him instinctively, finding only cool sheets and emptiness. My chest tightened as though something had been ripped out while I slept. On the pillow beside me lay a folded note, sharp edges cutting into the softness of the morning. My name was not written on it, only 4 words in his deliberate hand. "The hospital has been paid. You are free." Free. The word cut deeper than chains ever could. My throat burned as I stared at the letters, their simplicity crueler than any contract. He had bought my father's life, taken my first night, and walked away as though I were nothing but a ledger entry balanced clean. The silence of the penthouse mocked me. The city glittered through the windows, alive and endless, but I felt smaller than I ever had, like a shadow erased at dawn. I pulled the sheet around myself, clutching it to my chest as though it could protect me from the hollow gnawing inside. My reflection in the glass looked like a stranger, lips bruised from kisses that had felt like confessions, eyes wide and haunted. I wanted to tell myself I hated him, that he had used me, discarded me, left me broken. But my body betrayed me. It remembered the way he had whispered my name like a vow, the way his arms had trembled when they wrapped around me. He had been careful, most tender, and then he had left without a word. By the time I returned home, the world had shifted again. My father was out of surgery, color seeping back into his cheeks, his voice weak but alive. Relief crashed through me so violently that I almost collapsed at his bedside. His hand squeezed mine, rough and trembling, and his smile, though fragile, was worth every sacrifice. I told myself that was all that mattered. He was alive. That was the victory. But in the quiet moments, when his breathing evened out and the room fell still, my mind wandered back to the penthouse, to the man with storm-gray eyes who had touched me like I was more than a bargain, then vanished like a ghost. Days turned into weeks, and the hospital became a memory I tried to bury. I took a job at a small downtown art gallery, a place with white walls and lavender-scented air where silence felt safe instead of suffocating. I told myself I could start over there. I told myself I could rebuild. But every time the door chimed, my heart stumbled, bracing for footsteps that never came. At night, I dreamed of him. Sometimes he was standing at the window, city lights casting him in shadow, his eyes soft and unreadable. Other times he was gone, only the note on the pillow remaining, those 4 words echoing until I woke in a cold sweat. You are free. Free, but never released. One rainy evening, weeks later, I was locking up the gallery, the lavender still faint in the air, when I felt it. The shift, that same electric tightening I had felt in the hospital corridor. My pulse quickened before I even turned. Through the glass door, blurred by rain, I saw him. Ares Kane. Black coat slick with water, hair curling damp against his forehead, eyes fixed on me with that storm I couldn't escape. He stepped inside without a word, his presence filling the quiet space until the air seemed to tremble. I gripped the counter, my nails digging into wood to steady myself. My voice betrayed me, sharper than I intended. Why are you here? His gaze moved past me to a canvas on the far wall, one I had barely noticed before. A girl painted in crimson and gold, her face turned away, her hair falling like a river over her shoulder. She looked too much like me. My breath caught, my chest tightening. I turned back to him, my anger rising like a shield against the ache clawing at my ribs. "What do you want from me?" He met my eyes then, his storm-gray gaze unflinching, raw and more dangerous than ever. "Because you still don't know the truth," he said, his voice low and steady, and for the first time I saw something break in him, something that made my knees weaken. The note had told me I was free, but standing there in the lavender-scented gallery, staring at the painting of myself, I realized freedom was the cruelest lie of all. The gallery was quiet that morning. Too quiet, the kind of silence that made every breath sound louder than it should. The air carried its usual trace of lavender, but beneath it lingered something heavier, something that made the skin on my arms prickle. I had arrived early, hoping to lose myself in the simple rhythm of straightening frames and cataloging prints, but nothing about that day was simple. Because he was there again. Aries Kane. Standing in front of the canvas that should have been nothing more than a swirl of paint and color, but instead held me captive because it was me staring back. The girl in the painting had hair like mine, tumbling over her shoulder in dark waves. Her profile was turned, her body caught in soft strokes of crimson and gold. But I knew her. I knew the hollow curve of her mouth, the way her eyes burned even in shadow. She was me, and the realization stole my breath, ripped it right out of my chest. I forced my feet to move, each step clicking too loudly on the polished floor. My pulse thundered in my ears, but my voice came sharp, brittle when I finally spoke. "Why would you do this? Why would you let them hang me on these walls like a display piece?" He turned slowly, and when his storm-gray eyes locked on mine, I felt the ground shift under me. He didn't flinch at my anger, didn't defend himself with the arrogance I expected. His gaze was steady, raw, filled with something that hurt to look at. "Because I couldn't forget you," he said, each word falling heavy, deliberate. "Because every time I closed my eyes, I saw you." The admission rattled through me, and I hated how much it shook me. My fingers tightened around the clipboard in my hands, knuckles white. "You left me with nothing but a note," I spat, my voice breaking. "You bought my father's life. You took what you wanted and then you walked away. What else could it have been but a transaction?" He stepped closer, his presence wrapping around me, the scent of rain and cedarwood stirring memories I wanted to bury. "You think that night was about a transaction?" His voice was low, almost breaking, as though he was choking on the words. "Elena, it wasn't." I shook my head, desperate to hold on to the fragile walls I'd rebuilt. "If it wasn't, then what was it?" I demanded, my voice trembling. His jaw clenched, his eyes darkening as though storm clouds were gathering in them. For a heartbeat, I thought he wouldn't answer, that he would leave me with more silence and half-truths. But then he said it. "I knew your father long before that night." The air vanished from the room, leaving me weightless and dizzy. My heart slammed against my ribs. "That isn't possible." My voice cracked, but he didn't look away. He reached into the inside pocket of his coat and pulled out a folder, worn at the edges, the kind of thing touched too many times to stay whole. He laid it on the counter in front of me, his hand brushing mine for only a second, enough to send a shiver through me. "Open it," he said, his voice soft, but heavy with something I wasn't sure I was ready to face. My hands trembled as I lifted the cover. Inside was a photograph, old and faded. My father younger, standing beside a girl with the same storm-gray eyes as Aries. She was smiling faintly, fragile but alive. Across the bottom was a note in handwriting I didn't recognize. "Thank you, John, for saving her." The world tilted, and my breath came ragged. I looked up at Aries, my throat burning, my body shaking with betrayal and disbelief. "You knew him. You knew me before that night. And you didn't tell me." His gaze didn't waver, but something inside it shattered, like a mirror splintering into pieces. "Yes," he said quietly. "I knew him." The folder trembled in my hands, my tears blurring the photograph as the weight of his secret crushed me. The deal, the contract, the night. It had never been chance. He had chosen me before I ever signed my name. And that truth was more dangerous than any lie he could have told. Rain streaked down the gallery windows, turning the city outside into a blurred watercolor of gray and silver. I sat behind the counter long after the last visitor had left, the folder still open in front of me, the photograph trembling between my fingers. My father's younger face stared back at me, smiling beside the girl who had his storm-gray eyes, Aries' sister. The note written beneath their image burned into me like a brand. "Thank you, John, for saving her." My chest felt too tight, each breath shallow, fragile. The truth clawed at me, tearing down the fragile walls I had fought to rebuild. Aries had known my father. He had known me long before the night I signed that contract. He had let me believe it was a cold transaction, a cruel twist of fate, when all along it had been something else. The chime above the door startled me, sharp against the silence. My head snapped up, and there he was. Aries stood dripping from the rain, his black coat clinging to his tall frame. Droplet, sliding from his hair down the hard line of his jaw. His eyes locked onto mine instantly, storm-gray and relentless, pulling me into a tide I didn't want to drown in. I shoved the folder across the counter toward him, my hands trembling with fury. "You knew." My voice cracked, raw, jagged. "You knew my father, you knew who I was, and you never told me." His gaze flickered to the photograph, then back to me. He didn't flinch. He didn't defend himself with excuses. "Yes," he said simply, his voice low, rough. "I knew him." The words struck like a knife, simple and merciless. My breath hitched, anger and grief colliding inside me. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me think I was nothing but a contract to you?" He stepped closer, slow, deliberate. The air between us charged like the sky before lightning. "Because it wasn't about him anymore," he said, his voice almost breaking. "Not after I saw you." His words trembled in the air, dangerous and tender all at once. My nails dug into the counter, desperate to anchor myself as the ground shifted beneath me. I shook my head, tears burning my eyes. "No, don't do this. Don't stand there and act like this is anything more than you buying a night. You left me with nothing but a note, Aries. You left me to believe I was disposable." His jaw tightened, his storm-gray eyes darkening. "I left because I couldn't stay," he said, and the pain in his voice sliced deeper than his absence ever had. "Not because I wanted to." The rain outside beat harder against the windows, the storm building as if it were echoing the one inside me. My chest ached with the weight of his confession, my heart torn between fury and the ache that refused to let go of him. He reached out then, his hand hovering just inches from mine on the counter, not daring to touch, but close enough that the air hummed between us. "Let me explain." His voice was softer now, almost pleading. "Let me show you why it was never just a deal." I pulled my hand back as though burned, the tears spilling hot and silent down my cheeks. "I can't trust you," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I can't." The silence stretched, heavy and unbearable. He nodded once, slowly, like a man accepting a punishment he had always known was coming. Without another word, he turned and walked toward the door, the rain swallowing him whole as he stepped back into the storm. But that night, when I returned to my apartment, drenched and exhausted, I saw him again. He was standing across the street, soaked to the bone, his coat clinging, his hair plastered against his forehead. He didn't call out. He didn't knock. He just stood there, silent, unmoving, his storm-gray eyes fixed on my window. My breath caught, my heart twisting violently in my chest. I could have opened the door. I could have let him in, but I stayed in the shadows, watching him through the rain, my fingers pressed to the cold glass. Part of me wanted him to break down the door, to fight for me, to prove that I was worth more than silence and secrets. But he didn't. He only stood there until the storm drowned him, until his figure blurred into the night. And when he finally walked away, each step fading into darkness. I pressed my forehead against the window and realized the truth I didn't want to face. I had told him I couldn't trust him, but my heart already did. The rain had not stopped for days, a constant veil over the city that blurred neon lights into streaks of sorrow. I tried to bury myself in routine, opening the gallery each morning, breathing in lavender, arranging frames with steady hands, pretending the world hadn't cracked open. But every time the door chimed, every time shadows moved across the glass, my heart stumbled. I told myself I didn't want to see him again. I told myself his silence on that storm-soaked night meant the end. But the truth was crueler. I waited for him, even as I prayed he wouldn't come. And then he did. It was a Thursday, the sky outside bruised with clouds, thunder murmuring in the distance. The gallery was quiet except for the faint drip of rain against the windows. I was cataloging prints at the counter, ink smudging my fingers when I felt it. That shift in the air, that heavy stillness that always came with him. My pulse stuttered before I even looked up. Aries stood in front of the painting of the girl who looked too much like me. His coat dripped with rain, his hair curling damp at the edges, his storm-gray eyes fixed on the canvas as if it held answers to questions he had never dared ask. "Stop coming here." The words tore from my throat sharper than I intended. "You got what you wanted. Why can't you leave me alone?" He turned, his gaze locking onto mine, and the storm in his eyes surged. "Is that what you think?" His voice was low, steady, but carrying a weight that pressed against my chest. That I got what I wanted and walked away. I laughed, bitter and hollow, the sound echoing off the gallery walls. "You left before sunrise. You left a note like I was a business deal you'd closed. What else am I supposed to think?" He crossed the distance between us slowly, each step deliberate, controlled, but the pull of him hit me like a wave. I wanted to step back. I wanted to run, but my body betrayed me, leaning toward him before my mind could resist. "You gave me your first night," he said softly, his voice cracking like glass under strain. "Let me give you something real." The words shook me, dangerous and tender all at once. My grip on the clipboard faltered, my hands trembling. "Real." I spat the word back at him, anger laced with something I couldn't name. "You don't even know what that means." His hand lifted, hovering near mine, not touching but close enough to make my skin hum with memory. "Then tell me," he said, his voice a plea now, not a command. "Tell me what's I'll to you, Elena." I wanted to scream. Real was my father's weak laugh after surgery, the sound that told me he would live. Real was my mother's old soup recipe, scribbled on faded paper. Real was safety before the world broke. Real was not him, not this storm of a man who shattered my walls and painted me into his obsession. But the words tangled in my throat. My silence was an answer he heard anyway. That night, after he left, I found it. The folder again, hidden beneath a stack of brochures. A photograph of my father, younger, standing beside Aries' sister, and a note in delicate handwriting. "Thank you, John, for saving her." The truth closed in like a vice. Aries hadn't chosen me by chance. He had known me before the contract, before the penthouse, before the night that had changed everything. He had sought me out because of a debt, a bond, a secret woven through our families. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to burn every painting that bore my face, to erase the way his eyes searched me like I was salvation. But when I closed my eyes, I saw him outside my apartment, soaked and silent, waiting like a man carved from storm and longing. And I realized the truth that terrified me most. I wasn't free of him. I had never been free. The invitation came sealed in black, the card thick and heavy, the handwriting precise as a blade. A private auction, exclusive, mandatory, my boss had said, her eyes avoiding mine as though she knew something I didn't. I had told myself I wouldn't go, that I was done letting storms chase me. But the gallery needed me there, and I was too tired to fight another battle I couldn't win. The loft was alive with noise and glitter, chandeliers scattering fractured light across polished glass, the air thick with perfume, champagne, and the sound of people who had never known desperation. I wore a black dress that clung too tightly, my hair pinned, but already slipping loose. I stood at the back of the room, clutching a glass of champagne I couldn't bring myself to drink. My heart thrummed with dread, a wild thing desperate to escape. I scanned the canvases, bold swirls of color and light that seemed too loud, too confident. But then I saw it, tucked in a corner, half hidden as though it were waiting for me. My steps faltered as I drew closer, the title scrawled in neat letters beneath the frame. The Girl Who Never Loved Art. My chest seized, my breath a sharp, ragged sound that cut through the murmurs around me. The painting was me. Not a resemblance, not a hint. Me. My hair spilling over one shoulder, my eyes wide and hollow, my hands clasped like they were holding something broken. Every scar, every shadow, every fracture laid bare in brushstrokes that felt too intimate, too cruel. The room tilted, my knees weak, my grip on the champagne glass slipping until I set it down before it shattered. Why would he do this? Why would he put me on display, strip me to my soul in front of strangers who saw nothing but art? And then, I felt it. That shift in the air, the tightening of silence that meant only one thing. I turned, and there he was, Aries Kane, standing across the room, his black suit absorbing the light, his storm-gray eyes locked on me. He did not smile. He did not move. He only watched me, raw and unguarded, as though I were the only person in the room. I crossed the floor before I knew I was moving, my heels clicking sharp against marble, my heart pounding louder than the auctioneer's voice. When I reached him, my voice was low, trembling with fury and something far more dangerous. What is this? I gestured toward the painting, my hand shaking. Why would you do this to me? He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the heat of him, smell the cedar wood and rain that clung to his skin. Because you don't love painting, he said softly, his words deliberate, unflinching. But I love every brushstroke that reminds me of you. The words slammed into me, fierce and impossible. My throat closed, my eyes burned, my body trembling with the ache of wanting to believe him and the terror of what that would mean. Why? I whispered, the word breaking from me like glass. Why can't you just let me go? He reached out, his hand hovering near my cheek, not touching, just close enough to make my skin hum. Because I can't, he said, his voice rough, raw, as though scraped from somewhere deep. Because every time I try, I see you. The auctioneer's voice boomed through the loft, announcing bids. But I heard nothing. The world had narrowed to him, to me, to the painting behind us that bared every secret I had tried to bury. His storm-gray eyes shimmered with something I didn't dare name, something that made my heart fracture all over again. And in that glittering room full of strangers, under the weight of his confession, I realized something more terrifying than any contract I had ever signed. I wasn't fighting him anymore. I was fighting myself. The weeks after the auction bled together like rain on glass, each day heavy with a silence I couldn't escape. The gallery's white walls felt more like a cage than a sanctuary, every canvas whispering his presence even when he wasn't there. I told myself I had walked away for good. I told myself the painting was the final insult, the final reminder that Aries Kane would never see me as anything more than a portrait to capture, a storm to cage. But every night I lay awake hearing his words in the back of my mind. Because I can't. Because every time I try, I see you. The note appeared one morning, folded neatly on the counter as if it had always belonged there. No envelope, just my name in his sharp, deliberate hand. My breath hitched as I opened it, the paper trembling between my fingers. Room 614. Same suite. No contract. The words burned into me, louder than any plea, sharper than any demand. No contract, no deal. Just him. My Heart pounded as though it already knew my decision before my mind could catch up. I tried to tear it up, tried to crush it in my fist, but my body betrayed me. Hours later, I found myself in a cab, the city blurring past in streaks of rain and neon. My reflection in the window stared back at me, pale and afraid, but alive in a way I hadn't been since the night of the deal. The obsidian tower loomed ahead, glass and steel reflecting the storm above. My heels clicked too loudly on the marble floor as I crossed the lobby, each step an echo of my fear. By the time I reached the hallway, my hands were shaking, my breath shallow, the note crumpled in my fist like a secret I couldn't let go. Room 614. The numbers gleamed on the door, cold and unyielding. My knuckles hovered for a moment before I forced myself to knock, soft at first, then harder, the sound echoing down the corridor like a warning. The door opened, and there he was. Aries Kane. No suit this time. Just a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, his hair tousled, his storm gray eyes wide as if he hadn't truly believed I would come. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was thick, filled with everything we had left unsaid, everything that had broken us and dragged us back together again. Then he stepped forward and pulled me into his arms. His embrace was steady, warm, anchoring me to the earth even as the storm inside me roared. My hands clutched his shirt, my face pressed against his chest, and I felt his heartbeat, fast, desperate, real. I tilted my head up, my eyes finding his. The shattered look I had seen before was still there, but this time it was paired with something else. Hope, fear, love. When he kissed me, it wasn't fire and desperation. It was soft, slow, like he was rewriting the past with every brush of his lips. I kissed him back, my heart unraveling in his hands, my defenses collapsing like paper in the rain. He pulled back just enough to whisper against my ski. "In. I don't want a contract. I don't want a deal. I want you, Elena. All of you. Forever." The word forever landed heavy, dangerous, beautiful. My throat tightened, my eyes burning as tears welled, but I didn't look away. Because for the first time, I saw him not as the billionaire who had trapped me, not as the man who had haunted my nights, but as someone broken and human, holding out his heart like a confession. And I knew then that I hadn't come for answers. I had come because I couldn't stay away. The storm outside raged louder than ever as dawn crept through the tall glass windows of the suite. The city shimmered beneath the rain, lights flickering like dying stars, but inside his arms I felt the world pause. His warmth anchored me, his heartbeat steady against my cheek, yet I couldn't silence the voice inside me that demanded answers. I had given him everything, not just my body but the fragile pieces of my heart, and still the shadows of his secrets clung to him. I pulled away just enough to see his face, to study the storm in his eyes. He looked at me like a man afraid of losing the only thing that mattered, and that fear made my chest ache. "Tell me the truth, Aries. All of it. No more contracts. No more shadows. I need to know why you chose me." His jaw tightened, his hand brushing down my arm as though letting go might shatter him. "You think I found you by chance," he whispered, his voice low and rough. "You think it started in that hospital, but it began long before." The room seemed to shrink around us, the air thick with the weight of his words. My breath caught as he reached into the drawer of the nightstand and pulled out a worn folder. My name was scrawled across the front in sharp black ink. He handed it to me, his hands trembling in a way I had never seen before. With shaking fingers, I opened it. Photographs spilled out, old, faded, edges curled. My fee, Aether, younger, smiling, his arm around a girl with storm-gray eyes that mirrored Aries' own. She was fragile, beautiful, and in every picture her smile looked like it might break. Beneath one photograph was a note, faded but legible. "Thank you, John, for saving her when no one else could." My knees weakened as the truth struck me like lightning. "Your sister," I whispered, my voice breaking. "My father saved your sister." Aries nodded, his eyes wet, unguarded. "She was dying. No one would help us. Your father gave us a chance, gave her time, and I swore that day if I ever had the power I would repay him. But when I saw you, Elena, it wasn't just about a debt. It was you. The fire in your eyes even when the world tried to break you. I couldn't forget you. I couldn't let you drown. Tears blurred my vision as the photographs slipped from my hands onto the floor. All the anger, the betrayal, the confusion twisted inside me. You let me believe I was nothing more than a transaction, that I sold myself to you. Because I didn't know how to ask for you, he said, his voice raw. I was a coward. I thought if I put it in the form of a contract, you couldn't reject me. But I didn't want your body, Elena. I wanted you. Every broken, beautiful piece of you. The silence between us roared louder than the storm outside. My heart was pounding, torn between the fury of his deception and the undeniable truth in his eyes. He had seen me when I thought I was invisible. He had carried the weight of a vow made to my father, and in the middle of it, he had fallen for me. I bent to the floor, gathering the photographs with trembling hands, my tears soaking the paper. My father's smile stared back at me, and I realized he had given Aries a piece of hope years ago, and now Aries was giving me the same. I lifted my gaze to him, my voice barely a whisper. And what if I can't forgive you? Then I will wait, he said, his words steady, a vow. I will wait a lifetime if I have to. But don't tell me I never touched something deeper, because I know I did. The dam inside me broke, the tears streaming hot down my cheeks as I stepped into him, my hands fisting into his shirt, my forehead pressed against his chest, his arms wrapped around me like he had been waiting his whole life for this moment, his breath unsteady, his heart racing with mine. And in that embrace, I understood. He had been my storm, my mistake, my torment. But he was also my truth. Messy, flawed, human. And though the world outside raged, I let myself fall into him, into us, into the forever he had promised with nothing more than his broken heart and his trembling hands. The rain softened as dawn spilled gold across the city. In that fragile light, I realized the story wasn't about a contract or a single night or even the price of saving my father. It was about two broken souls finding each other in the wreckage and daring to believe that love, messy and raw, was worth everything. And when Aries whispered against my hair, "I love you, Elena," the world finally felt quiet.